Before I get on with the crux of my talk, which is regarding online etiquettes, maybe it would be good if we start all the way from the basics to try and understand why do we need etiquettes in the first place. We would be needing etiquettes because as a human being, as a social being, communication is an indispensable part of our life. As long as we live, as long as we continue to exist on the face of this earth, we're expected to communicate. And we must have heard a lot of talks, a lot of thoughts about communication. They say 40% of the communication is verbal, 60% is non-verbal, your body language matters, your informal communication matters, voice tone matters, annotations, intonations, modulations, all these are quite important. So I thought it will be good for us to start all the way from basics, all the way from the grassroots level. We will have a few thoughts run through with regards to what is communication, and then we could move on trying to understand what are etiquettes, and especially etiquettes in the context of online. So let's start off. Let's see what is meant by communication. We all must have, maybe as a part of our program, we must have run through some subjects where we would have had some understanding about communication. We must have learned different schools of thought, different theories, different components, different channels, etc. So we'll just brush upon some of these thoughts. So communication comes from the Latin word communicare, which means to share. So when we communicate, we are actually sharing. Now, what are we sharing? We're sharing our thoughts, we're sharing our ideas, we're sharing facts, we're sharing figures. So there are a lot of things which come into picture when we communicate, and whatever we possess, that is what we share. So I'm pretty sure all of us must have experience before our examinations come into picture, we have combined studies. Now, when we all come together for combined studies, each of us would be good in a certain domain of or a certain area of the subject. So what are we doing over there? We are willing to share what we know about that subject or what we know about that concept with the others. So the rationale behind communication is to share. We are sharing our thoughts, we're sharing our emotions, we're sharing our feelings. A few weeks ago, or maybe a few days ago, after completing my class, I had a few minutes left. And I noticed that a lot of students in that 5-10 minutes that they were sitting there idle, they were engaged in a lot of thoughts. So I was a little curious. I walked up to them and I asked, well, what are you guys talking about? So they were telling, so it was just yesterday that the movie Drishyam 2 was launched. So we're just sharing our thoughts, our reviews. Yeah. So whenever we get an opportunity, what are we planning to share? What are we doing? Whenever we get a platform to communicate, we are basically sharing. And what are we sharing? We are sharing our feelings, we are sharing our emotions, we are sharing our ideas, we are sharing whatever information that we know. Now, the kind of information that we possess, it would depend. For example, the principal or the management of the institution would communicate to the students in the form of notices, in the form of official emails, in the form of alerts. So that is also a form of communication. When we sit together with our friends, we chit chat, we pull each other's legs, we have a good laugh. So all these are different forms of sharing that we have put together. So communication comes from the Latin word communicare, which means to share. Now, what really happens in communication? So communication, it's the process by which you're sending messages. So it's just like sending an SMS from your phone. You pick up, you add the person's number, and then you type out the message, and then you click on send. On the other end, the person receives the message. So similarly, communication is the process of sending and receiving. Now, sometimes what happens is the communication has got a verbal and a non-verbal part. So verbal would be what we would be in terms of literature, or would be in terms of words, it would be in terms of numbers. And then there's a non-verbal part. So non-verbal part would be the tone, your intonations, your modulations, your body language, your expressions. So for example, if I were to say, please come, And then if I were to say, please come, there's a difference. Why? Because my tone has changed, isn't it? So likewise, whenever we talk about communication, so communication has got two major parts. It's got a verbal part, and then it's got a non-verbal part. So verbal part would be in terms of the words, the numbers, the figures, the tables, the charts that we might be using. And the non-verbal part would be in terms of our modulations, in terms of our intonations, in terms of our expressions, body languages, etc. Now, moving on, why do we communicate? What is the sole purpose behind communication? Why is it necessary that we have to communicate? The primary objective, the primary goal behind communication is to convey. Now, what are we conveying? We're conveying information, or we are also conveying in our understandings about information. Okay? So we are conveying information, or we are trying to express what we have understood about a piece of information. So for example, if there's an alert, fire, okay, and then someone comes up and asks you what just happened. So you got an information, that information says fire, and then what have you understood regarding that information? So what you have understood is that you have to take safety, you have to run for cover. Now, the objective behind communication is that you're trying to relay, you're trying to rally this information from one person or a group of person to another person or a group of persons. So for example, in your respective departments, they would be sending out emails to communicate with you. So that means the department is trying to communicate with a group of students. So the ultimate objective behind communication is that you would like to convey information, and then you would like to convey your understandings about information. So now, like, we all must be quite used to conveying information from one being to another. We would have talked to our relatives, we would have spoken with our friends. So since the time we just got up this morning, I'm pretty sure we would have at least met a couple of our fellow beings, friends, relatives, etc., and then we would have communicated. But there was this beautiful movie that came out in the year 1997, and it's called as Zias and Roxana. It's about a relationship between two animals. It's about a dog who befriends a dolphin named Roxana. Okay, so the dog's name was Zias, and then Roxana was a dolphin. And this entire movie talks about how they have been communicating with each other. It was very interesting because they were different species, but irrespective of the fact that you could be different species altogether, but even then, the concept of communications is extremely critical. It's extremely important, because sometimes you may be mistaken that communication may only happen between similar species or similar beings. It's not quite necessary. If at all you get an opportunity to, please do watch this movie. It's a very emotional movie. It's about how Roxana gets transferred from this dog befriends this dolphin, and they have a very close friendship. But for some XYZ reason, Roxana, she's taken over to another location very far off, and this dog literally goes in search for her, and how he unites with her. So the point over here is, the message that I wanted to leave with you guys is, sometimes communication is just not restricted with your fellow beings. It could be, probably you may have a pet at home. It may be a dog, it may be a cat, it may be a parrot, or it may be a bird. Sometimes it would try and communicate with you. So being a being on this earth, and as long as you continue to exist on this earth, communication is an indispensable part of our existence. Now, let's just population. We are a little over 7 billion, and in that 7 billion, almost 50% of people are on social media in one form or the other, and 91% of these active 3.5 billion users, they are active with their mobile phones. Recent statistics have shown an average user spends around 3 hours on social networks and messaging. So you understand how social media and social platforms are transforming, these online platforms are transforming itself into integral parts of our life, integral parts of our community, integral parts of our culture, integral parts of our belief systems. So we can no longer overlook the need for online communications. Now, let's get on to try and understand why do we need online etiquettes. And before we discuss a few of these etiquettes, let's try and understand what are online etiquettes. Now, online etiquettes are customary code of polite behaviors in the society or among the members of a particular profession or group for online communications. Now, these are codes of behavior. These are not written rules. These are not written laws. These are codes. These are norms that we have understood. So, for example, uh, do not steal. It's a code. It's a customary code. Uh, Talk politely. It is a customary code. Let's say if you talk harshly at someone, will someone put you behind jail? Okay, by IPC section 130, you spoke harshly. So because you spoke harshly, I'm going to send you for jail for 2 days. We do not have any law like that. But the expectation, the anticipation that you have to talk politely is a customary code of our society. So uh, likewise, online etiquette, these are customary codes that are imbibed, that are understood as a part of our existence in this society. Now, why do we have online etiquettes? The reason why we have online etiquettes is because in order to provide an appropriate guidance to ensure that the whatever interactions that are coming into picture, it would yield the results that we would desire. It would not have any adverse impact. It would not have any adverse consequences. It would yield what we actually intended. So that is the reason as to why we have online etiquettes. Now, online etiquettes, it's also known as netiquettes. It is also called as online etiquettes. It's also called as netiquettes. Now, unlike your conventional modes of communication, one very important aspect that you have to remember, or what you have to bear in mind, is your online communication, it has a mass influence. The consequences of the messages that you relay, you rally through the online platforms have more impact. It has got more consequences than never before, or than compared to any of the other conventional modes of communication. The implication that it has is much more than your conventional modes of communication. So I'm pretty sure some of you must have watched this video maybe 2 or 3 days ago, which was circulating through WhatsApp or through social media platforms regarding, Yedurappa talking about a lockdown. But unfortunately, it was shared at the wrong time. The video was a reflection of what happened in 2020, but it's been reshared in 2021. And that sent a lot of panic, that sent a lot of unwanted agitations, and that sent a lot of unwanted, it had a negative impact. Okay? So what you have to remember is whenever you communicate, especially on the online platforms, it would have a greater implication. A few years back, there was a small debate which happened, and Robert Vadra, the son-in-law of Sonia Gandhi, he happened to put a message saying, uh, 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 mango people in Banana County. So it was basically a pun. It was basically a humorous phrase. Now, this was misinterpreted, and it resulted in a certain state